Good evening and welcome to Curator Culture. I'm Sylvia Carmen Cubina, Executive Director of the Bass in Miami Beach, and I would like to give you a warm welcome tonight. Before we begin, I would like to profusely thank the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for their generous support of this program. So today is Wonder Woman Day. On October 21st, 1941, exactly 80 years ago today, Wonder Woman character appeared in All Stars Comics #8, and the rest is history. As luck and other things would have it, of course, the Bass recently acquired Dara Birmbaum's iconic video technology transformation Wonder Woman of 1978-79. So what a most perfect way to celebrate today. And without much more, I would like to introduce Tom Healy, our Curator of Public Programs. Tom, all yours.
Thank you, Sylvia. How are you on Wonder Woman Day? Happy Wonder Woman Day.
Great.
So,
thank you.
We have a very special Curator Culture tonight with two extraordinary individuals, the artist Dara Birnbaum and the curator and writer Barbara London. And we're going to talk a lot about them with them through the next hour, and we'll have you bring your questions in at about quarter of. So there'll be lots of time to get to know them well, and I won't spend any more time doing that. So please welcome Dara Birnbaum and Barbara London. Hi there.
Good evening.
Hi.
Welcome. Well, so I have two pros, two friends, two extraordinary women with us for a conversation tonight. And Dara Birnbaum is one of the most interesting artists to me, I think, of our time. She has, people talk about seminal artists, people who've done important work, but Dara helped invent an entire category of art making, and very compelling. And Barbara London has been there curating and writing about this whole new type of art from the 70s. In fact, she has a new book out that's about video art the first 50 years. And for 40 years, she was a curator at the Museum of Modern Art. So let me welcome you both.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
So Barbara, I'd like you to start the questions. You have your own podcast, so you're a pro at this too.
Well, it's a joy to be here with Dara, who is a wonderful friend. And I was trying to remember today when we actually first met. I know we danced at the Palladium together when Dara had her video up there, but I believe it might have been at the kitchen when, after Dara had been in Rome and Florence, came back to New York and was spending time with wonderful artists I knew, and they're her colleagues, Vito Acconci and Dan Graham. So it was maybe around the time you showed at Artist Space, or maybe it was when you did show your work at the kitchen. So we traveled in sort of a parallel circle. And actually after that, we traveled together to Japan, which was quite wonderful. But before that, I was always keeping my ear to the ground, really interested in what artists were doing. And Dara was someone I definitely tracked. And she did a talk in a series that I organized at MoMA called Video Viewpoints, and her Video Viewpoints was in 1981, and here are her program notes. And they're really very special notes, and maybe I'll put them on my website. I don't think I have them there now, but it just shows how inventive she is and how graphically oriented she is. Dara really understands space and architecture, but she really also understands the printed page and has a new book out, a reprint of her writings from '77, put out by Primary Information. But so that's a lot to sort of put out immediately. So, Dara, maybe you have some memories of when we first met.
I think that when I came back to New York in '75 from living in Florence, Italy, where I found video actually, I was uh, I was in need, as we all are, of people who can be peers to us and we can learn with. And one of those people was Suzanne Kufler. And we kind of joined together, almost like my second piece, which was A Drift of Politics about Laverne and Shirley. I felt we were kind of like Laverne and Shirley trying to get out there in the world together. And I think you noticed both of us. And I think it was at the kitchen, certainly, and had invited us up to MoMA to say hello and to get to meet you. We did it separately. And I remember the day I came, it rained. And you said to me, how's the rain outside? You okay? I remember that.
So for me, back then, '75, when Dara came back from this wonderful art, she'd hung around a space called Art Tapes 22, and it was, I think, your kind of clubhouse. It was where a lot of artists congregated. So it was a kind of center of ideas and people coming together. So I think in New York, you were looking for something similar. And so you and Suzanne, maybe you would go to screenings at the kitchen, or maybe at the anthology. It was around 1977 that I got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation and started what I called Video Viewpoints. And that's what you came and spoke at. And to me, we think about an institution like a MoMA as this impenetrable place. And I really felt I wanted to be open and pay attention and listen to artists, because they had so much information that was not in the magazines. Art Forum didn't cover any of this. So this was, you had to keep your ear to the ground.
So I actually have a question with that, Barbara and Dara. This was, in many ways, media arts was a new field when both of you were there. And I was wondering if there was something about the newness of it that created some space for women to, Dara, you had a bachelor's first in architecture and then in painting, both fields that had been so dominated by men and written about in men. And then media art is a new field that you're helping to create. And I was wondering what that was like to do that. Because you were saying, you're finding peers.
I mean, by the way, I just add a kind of asterisk that I did start in architecture, which is important to me. And I started at 16. It took 6 years for that degree. I never had one female professor.
Not one.
Not one. And I was the only woman to graduate in my class. So coming into the arts also was, let's call it, male dominated. And there is many people who think that what then was called video, because we weren't calling it media arts yet.
Right.
And everyone was very excited that video translates into IC. That was the big thing. But that it is a new thing, and women are a new thing to art, which they are. And as you probably very well know, historically, some of them snuck in. But I am not, for me, that's not why I picked up a video camera. That's not why. And even then, making it, for me, was not an easy road. Although there were more women for an example, when I was in Documenta 7, my first Documenta in 1982, the percent of women in the Documenta was 2%. I was the only video artist.
Extraordinary.
So I can say a little bit to parallel that. I went to graduate school and I did not want to count the angels on the head of a pin. I wanted to work with something that was evolving, had a lot of room for research. And it was really like doing primary research, you know, talking to Dara, talking to Namjoon, talking to Vito, and talking to others. And it wasn't just about saying, hi, how are you? It was about, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And certainly my curatorial colleagues, there were a handful of women. Kathy Ray Hoffman was in California, Doreen Mignot was in Amsterdam. So there were a few of us who were similarly minded, maybe, and we shared information. That's what you did back then. And I think you still do, but it was, to me, a time of sharing and learning and absorbing and figuring out indeed what this medium could do. So I was going to say, so we had museums, to many artists in the 70s, they were closed. And as Dara was saying, male curators, there was a male hierarchy, but so how to penetrate? So I was always trying to make it be an open and accessible place. And I think the way Dara worked with video, we all know that there was this portable camera, the Portapak. It came out in the late 60s. It was not cheap. It was a couple $1,000s to have one. It was not light like your iPhone is or your smartphone. And also television for some people then was the big bad ugly because it was a one-way street. And it took artists like Dara, it was very difficult for her to copy a program off air and work with it. That was not an easy thing. So she was like a pirate working all of that out. And, you know, she did it. And then she really was thinking about how television is controlled by men. And how are these men portraying women on TV? You know, and not always pleasant. I mean, it was more like as a sex object or a pretty thing. So I think these two things. So technology evolved and the field changed.
Yes.
So
I understand. Yeah. So Dara, could you actually talk about that for the younger people in our audience? What that physically meant, as Barbara was talking about working with this media and needing to be a pirate, just even the physical technology and possibilities of how you had to make earlier work like that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm glad that both you and Barbara are bringing it up. It was a time when there wasn't yet, it just was starting cable TV, for example. And there were no home recording devices. And there was no way to get, let's say, Wonder Woman, although you got her for lunch, I heard, at the Bass, which was fantastic. But
yes, Linda Carter showed up at the Bass Museum today.
But for me, she was one way coming at me, and Barbara very eloquently put that this was mainly for me, that the television industry seemed dominated by men. And Wonder Woman for me was designed in a certain way. Certainly the program was mostly produced by men. And it was important to do what later on became, my work became called, which is talking back to the media. That was from Holland that they did that after I showed there. Oh, she's talking back to the media. But to get the actual footage from broadcast TV required me, I was a lot younger and looked differently and kind of make friends in the industry with young guys who would sneak the image out to me. from the recording studios where they were receiving it. And so I became known as a pirateer. But it was damn hard. And even later, in a piece like Tiananmen Square, Break-in Transmission, which is later, and is about the Tiananmen Square and the communication industry in that way. I wanted certain footage of what was happening there that was captured by one of the major networks. To get that footage, they weren't going to air it. And to get that footage, I had a friend who edited news at that corporate network. Went up there, had to bring a lead-lined bag with me, met in the bathroom, and she snuck the footage under the stall to me, which went into the lead-lined bag that I could get out of the facility with. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
People
So-
don't realize that because I think young people, especially, are growing up with such a multiplicity of distribution channels and images and being able to put themselves and exchange roles, in that way. It's hard to imagine that only a few decades ago, which is not a lot of time
Right.
really on the planet, things have changed so enormously.
So I wanted to, oh, sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
I was going today over notes and rereading things, and I want to give a little description that Dara made of how, when she was editing Wonder Woman. So if you can just imagine, there's Dara working with equipment that's not the highest end, but it's, what the consumers had maybe, and maybe you worked, I think you did sometimes with an editor at EAI, but you said you were exaggerating her special effects and her twists and turns. So Wonder Woman is a little doll in a jewel box, unable to break through her role. And I just love that this was Dara. Dara is a strong thinker and really is quite amazing in how she works. So
Can I just put a slight, I'm sorry to cut you off, addendum on that. Artists like myself, I think, who wanted to remain independent, took any way they could to find venues where such things as editing could take place, even on a more simple level. But editing at those times was all analog. It wasn't that simple. You had to line up open reel tapes, things like that. And I was given permission by Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, where I taught, at night to go into the smaller independent room they had for editing. And that's where Wonder Woman was created. And to get the stutter steps, when people see it, the kind of boom, 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 stutter steps, took a lot of work to line them up and let it flow. And I almost put my hand through the wall one night. I was trying so hard to make 7-frame, 11-frame edits, And years later, I would go to a production studio and see someone program it into the computer. Do 7, do 11, do this, do that, press the button. It's there. So there's a real difference in what kind of labor was involved at the time.
I'd like you to say something about Nova Scotia, because to some people, it's just the name of a city. But Nova Scotia College of Art and Design was a little hub of great artistic experimentation. And Dan Graham was there, John Knight, all kinds of people. And
Right.
That must have been a great community also for you.
Dan Graham, who I met in New York, actually, we were going to meet in Florence. We never did. And we ran into each other. We became part. Dan was an slightly elder statesman. of a small group of artists who were young. And we would try to show outside of the gallery system in alternative spaces. And Willoughby Sharp was also the slightly older person for that. Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, its dean at the time, who passed away last year, Gary Kennedy, was very instrumental in kind of breaking bounds, because Canada and the US, although they're adjacent, you see all kinds of Beavis and Butthead jokes about the difference between the two countries.
Yeah.
Gary reached out to New York and other places as a center to bring in tremendous talent in the arts, very strong artists like Dan Graham, like James Coleman, Michael Asher, Martha Rosler. Went on and on and on. And it was fantastic years up there. Yeah.
I read also that what he did was he took one salary and he divided it up many ways. So he could actually invite a big range of people up like yourself. So it was, I think that was very clever. So I think we all had to be clever and entrepreneurial sort of in the 70s and 80s. So, yeah.
I think there were two things that Dan thought about that at that time, because he was invited to do a full year. And that's interesting as well. He did not want to do that. And he did imagine a system that would work of artists who he believed in. And each one would take a fifth of the year and run it their own way, but we were all pretty much in sync with how we were thinking and doing. So that, what I'm saying is, there is both the person who creates, but there's a receivership. And with Gary, there was an allowance for that.
That's nice.
And Dara, would you say that that kind of give and take, kind of conversational approach in community has continued to this day in the work you do and the people, other artists you are in community with? Or has that changed?
To be honest, I'm a Scorpio. I'm going to be honest. I think our community, sense of community and culture is changing in the United States. And I think Barbara was inferring that at the very beginnings of the creation with video and the tools was a lot of sharing going on and a lot of sense of community. And I think what's happened now is it would be a good thing with the pandemic affecting change if some of us younger people who are out there listening would start to reformulate community. Because I think too much happened in the rising star being recognized, and also a commodification of the arts started to grow.
Right.
I think that's inevitably going to change, or is changing. I think, yeah, we still have, you know, I taught at Yale for about 7 years, and I taught at Columbia, but I would say to young people, if they were bemoaning, I would say, well, now the rents are lower, you know, do it in your apartment, get a screening group together, or get the same way Nancy Holt and Robert Smithson back in '68 had evenings once a week where artists would come and show the slides of what they were up to, and then there would be a conversation. So I think it's really, and maybe we're able to do that now with different cities, different countries because of Zoom, but it takes, I think, being in the same room sometimes to have
well,
a connection.
One irony is that the very medium itself that we're talking about, video and then moving image and then its explosion into internet and such, those have been forces for kind of diminishing community and having us be disembodied with one another and work. And I wanted to ask you, Dara, you and I were talking a few days ago about how that even happens with work, that you had an experience where, and maybe you could talk about it, where you found that someone had actually used your work without talking to you.
I called it that they stole my work. I was very surprised. I do Google myself because with video and moving image work, distribution patterns are getting wider, and I don't always know where it is. And so I will look for where it's gone in case my distributor's not up to date, whatever it is. And it interests me. And there was my work frame by frame, but the soundtrack was stripped. And the younger artist put on a brand new soundtrack that was more adhering to her own herself. She's Black. And all of a sudden, this was in the galleries in London and on YouTube and on and on. I think it has to do, I want to look forward to talking with her. I think we need more talk. But no, I wasn't asked at all. And in fact, she might have thought of it as an homage. And in fact, Wonder Woman, that thankfully the Bass now has a collection, is almost iconic in its own time. So it's like reaching for an icon rather than an artist's work. And when I appropriated in the 70s, going into the 80s certainly, I felt I was taking images that were made by corporations, in a sense. But I never touched the work of another artist. That was a line I never crossed. And I think that we're into a period that's going to surprise all of us because of this proliferation of imagery. And who owns what when the distribution channels are so broadened. I think that Hito Style has written about this a bit in Poor Image. I think other people beginning to approach it. I know that Legacy Russell came out with a book that's being heralded as glitch feminism. And that, so at first, of course, I was very upset. I was angry. And thinking about it, I thought, you're seeing the future. You're seeing something about the future.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Barbara, what do you think about that? And what becomes material? What becomes an artist's property, copyright? Are we having changing notions of that, good or bad?
Well, I guess in that way, coming out of an institution that really respected the artist's voice, and I put a lot of importance on that, and always. Yeah, we are going through a lot of change, and change is good, but I have to really think all of that through as to someone just taking Dara's imagery and popping on other sound.
Right.
I think it's kind of, to me, lazy or disrespectful, or so it's with your smartphone, you have software, you can do all kinds of editing now, so yeah, anyway.
Sure.
What can I say?
No, but it does speak to a real transformation in what people think of as art making and what people think of as belonging to someone. And, we have, since much of this work isn't even meant to be shown in a particular place, we have the whole issue of non-fungible tokens as art. The idea of this physical thing that you wouldn't steal, you wouldn't take, is seemingly different in an endless flow of media.
Well, I think things are changing. I think the NFTs are going to go through an evolution. We're not there. It's not finished yet. What it is, how it is, how it's bought and sold, that you have to spend so much money just to get the coins. That's not a simple matter. So you've got all of that. What I find interesting now is that artists, some of them are kind of interesting, who have explored VR, but have really taken it and pushed it really far. And now, they created these environmental works, not with the goggles, but with the real experience that you're going through. But now they're talking, some of them are talking about doing theater. And I think that's a great thing. Then that becomes another form of experimental theater using technology. So I know there's an artist by the name of Ed Atkins, and he buys off the shelf avatars. It's very easy to do. That's something that's out there for people who are working with the moving image. But he really works with language and really creates a script and puts personality onto the avatar that is his creation. So that's what I look for. I'd rather see somebody do something that's making a personal statement rather than take Dara's imagery and put music on it. Yeah. As you've all been saying, it's of course very easy to do, but long lasting, no, I don't think so. Has a long lasting work.
Well, I have the other day, and this shows how old I'm getting. I put a nice image into your press, but I'm there. Let's say that the other day I decided to finally watch TikTok. Okay, I didn't see it before. And I called it to my assistants. I said, I'm going to watch Kit Kat, which is a cookie. And I saw that a earlier work that I had known of an artist, and I'm going to forget her name, unfortunately, at the moment, is very popular, her older work on Kit Kat, TikTok. And for different reasons than it was maybe originally created, but a wave came through from that work that might have been in the 80s to this. And what was glammed onto was that it was a horror film, fake horror film, loved the music, and this was taken, and the number of views ran into the multi-millions all of a sudden.
This is Cecilia Condit.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know her.
Thank you. And anyway, it is about intention. I think that great artists have great intention in their work. And there have been protective spheres for what that is. As an example, hierarchical museums. What do we do when there's been a madness of distribution, almost like a virus? And how do we give access to people a more forceful and purer sense of the artist's intention, not interpretation, but intention?
Well, I think in the case you're mentioning, because I know Cecilia Condit and I showed her work in the 80s and I know it quite well. And as you say, it's very ghoulish. It's perfect for Halloween. It's very spooky. But anyway, she was thrilled that these young people, young women who really tracked the work, really followed it, and they didn't alter it. They were savoring it.
Mhm.
You know, so they were really looking at it on TikTok in the original, and they have communicated with her. They talk all the time. So that's a very interesting phenomenon. You know, and it's a more senior artist engaging with a very young generation whose codes are very different.
I want
But
to
who-
follow
yeah,
up on that. I love the word ghoulish. It's a great, great word. But hold on for a moment. I just want to tell the audience this conversation, we have so much to talk about and so far to go. We're going to go over. So don't worry about, we'll be talking questions and other things. So don't worry if I don't call on you yet. We have much more to go. And so I want to go back in time with that sense of ghoulishness and then also community to talk about the time right before the millennium, downtown for 1999, and you participated in a show that Josh Harris and Theo Koenig were doing called Quiet, and in the storefronts downtown. Could you talk to us a little bit about that, Dara, that experience?
You experienced it.
Yes,
I
I was
was
there
in it.
too.
Yeah, but
I didn't participate in the orgies. I didn't shoot any guns, but I did see your work.
which was not one of the orgies or the guns. This is very interesting. I don't even know what word to put to it. It's beyond a show, or it is a let's say, and I don't mean it in a bad way, a three-ring circus of a show. Created, Josh Harris had a lot of interest in performative art, which he did in part. And he also made tremendous money at that right turn of the century through .com era, the internet. And he was interested in the arts, as was Leo, very young at that time. His father, very well-known curator in Europe, and they got together, like Casper, and they got together, and Josh bought two full buildings, not storefronts, buildings, downtown in New York, that he converted. And they were converted into spaces to show what quiet or we live in public would be. And maybe you can bring up what some of that diversity was. I was commissioned to do a work, and I showed some of videos that I had done. And as you said, they were kind of on tiers. And then
Yes.
three images that were called Quiet Disaster. And they were images of, for example, what we're seeing now, a man escaping from a disaster. It happens to be fire. The look, the affect that's there. And one of the other ones, she's drowning. So the water element and looking at disaster. And a third one, this one is simply looking back, this glance of a kind of what's coming at me. And that's the title I gave it, not Quiet, but Quiet Disaster.
Right.
And what happened is that show went on for a couple of weeks right before the new year of the new millennium, and closed
Y2K.
on the Y2K, exactly. And as I think you noted, 1 year pre the disaster, the second attempt, the successful attempt at the World Trade Center.
Right. So I wanted to stay with these images because people know much more your moving image work and video work. And I remember being mesmerized by seeing these three large, colorful pendants with these still images that feel as if they're stop time from moving images. And I was really taken with them. They were not shown on a clean white gallery wall as they are here. They were in the midst of, there were, I think on either side, there were tiers with television monitors with other work of yours. And it struck me this sense both of the drawing and the sense that these seemed like stills from moving images, but also just their effect. And also the sense of three, but the titles are there's fire, there's water, and then you don't have another element. You have looking back. And that was mesmerizing to me. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that sequence was and how this work came about.
I started the work, actually, I'm thinking now, for an offer from October. Rather, an academic journal, if I don't know another word to put it. I mean, I used to save my money waitressing to buy a copy, and I was offered to be able to do an essay. And the essay was in part about this kind of still imagery of animation. And within that, I still appropriated from a multitude worldwide of anime and different ways, fascinated by it and what could be captured by it. Perhaps in a different way than Lichtenstein, who was one of the New York School of Arts that I grew up with. Right. But this need to zero in on looks of anguish at that time, of unknown but in the background terrorized anticipation or need to escape from. And I'm glad you picked up on this work because I think it's as relevant today, actually.
I do too. And it is a fascinating thing that you talk about where they're in crisis. There's a disaster that these people are engulfed in. But as you say, there's a look of anticipation. It is almost a kind of iconography of moving image because there's, in a sense, a story that's moving forward that they're looking for, whether it's rescue or death or, what is happening. I think they work so powerfully as objects, drawings, almost like paintings, sculptures, but you can't escape the sense that they're part of a moving image.
But they're fascinating because Dara chose a circle. So it's like a portal. It's like yes. We're inside a safe place and we're looking out at this. And unlike Lichtenstein, you don't have a bubble text like a manga would have, or a Lichtenstein would. You've got, this woman on the left is shrieking, or, but the anguish is all contained in this circle. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
At the same time, just to say about this containment or not, actually, I wanted them very iconographic within this multitude of activities that was going on in the quiet show. Everything from orgies to drinking yourself to death and hell to being served food in heaven to guns that one could take. By the way, I did miserably with those, and other artworks. But this wonderful question about, is this activity art? It was very provocative.
Yes.
And there were moments of art entwined in a kind of chaos of going into a new millennium. And what I made that Leo wasn't so happy about was, sorry, Leo, if you're listening, is buttons, pins of the same images. so that people could take away these images from there and wear them anywhere else, which once in a while I would see.
Right. Well, wonderful. Thank you. So let's talk about a little bit further about disaster. I mean, that was just a prelude, just a year or so before 9/11. We've just been living for the last almost 2 years now, 18 months or so, through another disaster. What for both of you, what have your pandemic experiences been?
I can say for me, I ended up doing a lot of reading and a lot of writing. I wrote a lot of catalog essays, and I took the opportunity to create a podcast series. So my Barbara Lennon Calling happened because of COVID and the lockdown. I knew that artists were in their studios, and you know, they agreed to talk to me. So anyway, so that's one of the things that I did. But I think if you're in referring to 9/11, that was a very traumatic time, and New York really changed. I remember riding the subway and everybody talked, everybody asked. You didn't know who these people were, but they asked, how are you? Where were you? So that was a very unusual time. And Dara was downtown. I was living then on the Upper West Side, but I happened to be on a bus crossing 14th Street and did see one of the planes go into the tower. So it was shocking, but the last couple of 18 months have been not very pleasant, but I've worked out ways to stay sane and stay healthy. And I walked a lot. I read a lot and I walked a lot, wearing a mask. So.
Dara.
Yeah, quickly a recap of 9/11. I live within 14 blocks of where the World Trade Center had been, and saw the planes go in. Our street was a direct target street for one of the planes. Came very low down our street to aim.
Oh, wow.
And not only that, but as a young architect, very young, I worked on those buildings.
I did not know that. Wow.
I was young. I did the, our firm, it was designed in Japan. Our firm in New York did a lot of the working drawings. And I was in on a lot of the conversations about the type of skin wall, very new construction, tallest building in the world at the time, where columns would go, where service vehicles would go, etc. And unfortunately, I knew right away they would pancake, they would collapse, as the drawings all came back to me. And everyone in the street, I was saying that, thought I was out of my mind, but that was a very deep experience, having been there on those plans and watched this happen 14 blocks away, where I didn't sleep for 3 days. The only thing that I slept. The only thing that woke me up was the odor. And again, I'm going to bring up being Jewish. I had, being Jewish, grown up right after World War II, wondered a bit what people went through in the camps with the smell of human flesh burning. And this is the first time I ever smelled human flesh burning. But going back to our emergency of now, I have a slightly different take, which is that we create certain environments that allow for things to happen within them. And what I mean by that is, again, Scorpio, I don't think we've been living in the best way, humanity, going forward. And it makes not only us, but species, animals, marine life, everything more susceptible to a disintegration, to a deterioration. And as I told you on a phone call, I've never been able to, some people can, make art in a present tense of a disaster. I seem to need distance. So Tiananmen Square was made at a distance from the actual event, but ways to market, transmission tower from the Gulf War, and I was not able to, nor wanted to, do an artwork about COVID. I thought if I saw one more drawing of COVID, I was going to go crazy, to be honest with you. I mean, but I admire the artists who are trying to represent. I do. But I can't. And I don't know when my comment will come. It will infect my artwork going forward. I know that. And it will everyone else that's going along the way. For me, this actually is a critical turning point for the globe. It's a pandemic. I know there was the Spanish flu. It's again asking the question, what is community and whose community is it?
Right.
And I hope that artists remain as those who lead the way toward a new perception, challenge the perspective of what we have. Because historically, I think that's why I fell in love with art.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. You know, one of the things I felt as a significant difference between the two kinds of disasters and what happened at Barbara, you referred to how supportive everyone was in the community. You walked down the street and everybody asked how we were and were warm and friendly. And you know, we did demonize another, the Muslim community and the Arab world after this. But at the time of the attack, there was a sense that there was an external event and we all responded. In this pandemic, the danger, and it's become a political danger, is the sense of our danger to one another, both that we can spread the virus, get it from other people, and then how that's been politicized, but not an external force, but, you know, the community itself being a possible danger. And I think that at a time when we've had such a frayed civic culture and community, that's been a particularly devastating result of the pandemic. This isolation, kind of hatred and division that came from it. And so I too hope that artists can be at the forefront of helping to figure out how we address that.
I do too.
Yeah, I've always looked to artists or trusted artists or feel your sensitivity, what can I say? I rely.
Yeah. So interestingly, the work that the Bass has acquired and that we are celebrating this day, Wonder Woman Day, the comic strip that it was based on was created in 1941 in the midst of a war. And the idea that we needed superheroes of all kinds, and we needed a new one to help us imagine that we could solve disasters and that people could be rescued and saved. And so here comes Wonder Woman. But more importantly for us today, here comes a work of art that was in response to and in engagement with a TV show and the things of the time. So Dara, maybe you could set this up a little for us before we actually show, and for the whole audience, we're going to show this really extraordinary work in a minute. But Dara, if you could talk a little bit about it before we do.
Okay. One thing I was thinking of, someone asked me a question. I was answering if I ever created characters, other characters like Lynn Hirschman Leeson. And I said, I'm the character, and tonight I dress like the secretary part of Wonder Woman. So now we're gonna, you know, for me, Wonder Woman was an image to be fought back against on television. For many reasons, I was both attracted a bit, as most people are, and repelled. And I had only a black and white TV. When I started to edit it, I edited it in a studio that had color. It's the first time I ever saw it in color.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, she's wearing red, white, and blue. It is the American flag. So this just stupefied me. And I felt that this had to be grappled with, taken in hand, that I can't change with 3 twists and a big explosion from my secretary into my Wonder Woman. And that also that, as I told Hansel Obrist, is not this, we live in the space in between, hopefully. And at that time, people I felt were peers, Jenny Holzer, Barbara Kruger, etc. I think we're trying to get our work out into a multiplicity of venues. So Wonder Woman was shown on cable opposite the real Wonder Woman. It was shown at the Kitchen in an experimental film festival as a kinescope. It was shown at the Collective, which was great cinema downtown. It's the first video ever shown. And it was shown at the Palladium on all 50 screens or whatever they had for Girly Girl Evening. And
Yes.
this was our way of trying to get images out, to give them a voice. And it was in a hair salon, and that was one of the first things, because they had the only monitor in all of downtown, and that monitor showed the Italian version of Woodstock. So I asked the owner, "Can
Out to the street.
Yeah,
The only
out to the
monitor
street.
that you walk by and saw TV,
And the
which
sound
now are just
coming out.
ubiquitous everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. It was the only one." And I asked the woman who owned the salon, could I show my work? Well, what is your work about? And I don't always know quite how to say that. So I said, Wonder Woman. And she said, that's fantastic. I love Wonder Woman, and I've been told I look like her, which she did. So if you want to roll the tape now, maybe we should see what that is. I don't know.
All right.
We've got to stop meeting like this. Come on.
Wow. Take that, wonder maker. You're need to be unmuted, Dara. Barbara's coming back.
There.
Barbara, why don't you talk about, I'd love to know when you even first saw technology transformation Wonder Woman.
I think
Do you remember?
I probably saw it the year it was made. I don't remember where I saw it or if Dara brought it up for me to see or I can't remember. But I do remember dancing at the Palladium.
Right.
And I was going to say, it's so interesting that the Quiet Show, the year, because I was looking back through notes, and 1999 was the year PS1 MoMA co-did the Greater New York show. So
yes,
it's a curious time. Anyway, but it's a fantastic work. Dara, do you want to talk about the music? How did you edit?
Yeah. No, this is a great example. I think one is music, as you know, has always been really important to me, the work.
yes.
And I grew up on Godard. And he with Mieville, woman, decided to try this long version, get away from Paris, back to Switzerland. Anyway, they called their studio Son Image, so sound and image. And it woke up in me. And I think the people of my generation doing video, that woke up in us way before MTV. How important sound and image could be together there. And as an example, in Wonder Woman, I was editing the first part of it and thought it needed, at that time I was very Marxist, so I thought that it needed a dialectic in a way. I don't feel, meaning something else, the second half that was commenting on the first half. And I was editing late at night with the radio on. And through the radio came this song. It was done by the Wonder Woman in Disco Land band. I'd never heard of it. And I thought, my God, someone answered me. All of a sudden came the audio. And the record came out. They had only one hit. And the record, Wonder Woman in Disco Land record, LP for the disco floor, had two sides, the American side and the European side. And the European side, just to give you a hint, is all the oohs and ahs. I'll show for you. But, and that was it. And I think in later works, there's different fusions of music sound as an articulate power in relation to image as an articulate power.
Because the viewer, listener picks up sound or processes it before the image. I guess I've read that we don't need our mental, like, what do you call it, or organizational. Sound just, comes in and we react. So it's interesting.
I, for example, not in that way, I didn't know that. But in PS1, when I showed Kiss the Girls in 1979, which shortly followed after Wonder Woman, that was the first time ever at PS1 they gave a video viewing room. And I felt, as a young, more angry, rebellious woman at that time, oh God, with video, they're always showing it down the hall, by the bathroom, and its own room,
So true.
and this room was down the hall by the bathroom. And I decided to do a soundtrack for Kiss the Girls that was, again, more that disco beat, like boom, 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 and bring in speakers that were usually rock and roll speakers to issue the sound out and take the video off the pedestals they gave me and put them on their own traveling crates. And so that when you would hear the video before you would see it. And thank God Alana Heiss let me go ahead with that. And so if you were down the hall, all of a sudden was this bass beat. And then you're driven to these small lights twinkling. That was a different way of using music.
And I want to say you were quite amazing. There was the Whitney Biennial and your PI magazine. You said you were next to, or you were right adjacent to Barbara Kruger. You said, you're not putting me in that little stupid room. You're going to put me right where, all of my colleagues are. And you were tough. You were good.
I'm still a little tough. But yes, I very much felt that I fought like hell to get video out of an isolation, and out of a darkened space. I felt that at the time, well, it needed to be in a dark space at the beginning. But we're past that. And my feeling was there was too much history of cinematography going on to video in that way. And that video had the potential to be its own language. And so in the 1985 biennial, where Damnation of Faust occurred, by the Barbara Kruger, I think, it was, thank God, put out in the open on the fourth floor as an artwork. And I am not saying that video art, media art, NFTs aren't artwork, but it was so important for me to have that expanded dialogue. Because people don't just look at your work, they look at it in museums in the context of other work. Yeah.
And I do think, speaking of that idea of having a language different from cinema, I think so many things about this work are made it seminal because of those things: the stutter, stop, the repetition, the way that sound works through it, that there's a kind of mesmerizing circularity to it. At the same time, it has, a linear progression. So it did seem that contrast between the two is like a clear announcement of a language different from cinema.
One time, Jean-Paul Faugier from France was writing for Cahiers de Cinema. My French is miserable. And he said about Faust that he thought, because I used digital technology at that time, it just had come in, that I would use a character in screen, but split the screen. So two characters could coexist, or a mirror image of one character to the other, on and on. And he said in traditional cinema, he thought that the character calls for the character off screen to come on screen. And all of a sudden in digital video, you had the ability to have a simultaneity of existence. And I also think that early works like Wonder Woman, for whatever reasons, aberrated the more traditional aspect of cinema being narrative, a linear narrative. And although one could plot a linear narrative to Wonder Woman, it's not that.
Right. I do love that idea of where one looks to the simultaneity in video versus the idea that there's someone to be brought in. You're looking out to a stage in cinema. Wow. So we actually have a number of questions, and talking about bringing others on stage. Dara, some of these questions are actually in the chat, and I was asked if you might speak to some of these that other people haven't seen.
Right. Yeah. I'm not getting
I'll read, but here's Bill Lynch. Have you created any of your own characters like Lynn Hirschman, Lisa Roberta, or Agent Ruby?
I'm sorry. Like Lynn, and many other people starting. I can't relocate it, but I did think I answered it. That gosh, no. 2, I'm not dead yet. Maybe that's where I should go. And 3, I felt I am the character. But if he wants to ask me more, this is fantastic. I think I'm skirting the issue a little, maybe.
And then there's another question of actually, where was the first screening? Obviously, it premiered in a beauty salon window, but how? That's an interesting question of when you'd say first screening was, that it happened in maybe an art forum, an art context.
But the beauty salon was not the first screening, was it?
I don't know.
Elsewhere.
It was pretty near it, but I don't think it was. No.
Okay.
I have to say that when we started what I called then video, that most video, not all, but most video independent artists did not get premieres. To me, that was a Hollywood term, you know. And I really wish I could remember. I answered the question, I felt there was a little bit of simultaneity of trying to get it out on cable TV opposite the real Wonder Woman, then the next week going to the hair salon, then making it into a kinescope for the kitchen, then taking advantage of Guerrilla Girls Night at Palladium. I want to bring up one thing that was of interest to me. Barbara Kruger showed with, and maybe, I don't know where she's showing now, but at that time with Mary Boone. Okay. And in Baudrillard wrote the introductory essay for her show. This is something I could not believe, that a current, pretty high powered for that day, author would write for a catalog essay for the arts. What he said about Barbara, and I relate to this very much, and I think it was my generation, Janny, Barbara, myself, that we were so filled with the images coming into our culture. And he used a great French term that I don't remember. But what it means is that their work is almost like vomiting it up, vomiting it back again into the culture. So you had Barbara putting post-its, not post-its, but, like stamps on telephone booths, Jenny designing T-shirts, and it went in Times Square. I think with Wonder Woman, it's a little the same thing. I don't remember the first screening. I remember this kind of a screen of culture.
I don't consider it vomiting out. I would consider it, you're making a statement. You're making, you all are making very strong statements.
The French term is probably a lot better. If anyone knows it.
It sounded better.
Very eloquent. It doesn't sound like vomit, but it means precisely that. And it meant that an absorption in our culture of images, commodification coming in, was so filling us that one had to throw them up and out again.
Well, it certainly was the landscape. I mean, it was, anyway, there's many things.
Yeah.
So one question I'm getting for you, Dara, off the screen here is, you do now have a commercial gallery show with Marion Goodman. Could you talk a little bit about that experience from, the sense of profusion of work in lots of places and then working with a gallery and exhibitions in that kind of commercial space?
I worked with a few galleries. When I started, I might have been against galleries, to be honest. My growing up years were in Berkeley as a Marxist. So
yes.
I enjoyed being in what seemed like alternative groups. And eventually, some offers came in to show. I never reached out to a gallery. And I think it might have started with Josh Baer, I'm not sure. With his partner at the time, Rosetta Brooks, who knew me from London and written on the work. And I saw that they were willing to let me do what I wanted to do, and that there was no restriction toward my creative voice. And thankfully, that has mainly been present for me even through these 21 years now with Marion Goodman Gallery.
Oh,
And for me, Marion is one of the very few galleries, and here comes my advert, but is one of the few that I've experienced that has the artist in mind first. And a lot of the sales go toward museums. She has a little bit more belief, not that there isn't collectors, but there is an understanding of getting the artist into an existence that will last for them, that doesn't have to be of collector. The only other thing I would say is that when one is showing inside a commercialized system, that is always in your mind as well.
right.
How you deal with it is something. Who you're dealing with is something. But it's there.
So Dara, I want to make a little plug for a project with the Doro publishers and
Doro.
collaboration between Doro and Marion Goodman. And it's a very unusual book. This is a very fine art book publisher, and Dara has edited Arabesque, her very incredible 3-channel work, to fit into this book, and it will be shown in the Marion Goodman booth at Miami. And I think it's—
And you will be there too, Barbara. You'll be in Miami then.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's a sign of Dara's agile mind, her versatility, and her willingness to experiment and try something new. So I find all of your work, Dara, it's very provocative, very exciting, and I can't wait to see the book.
Thank you.
Yes.
We got notice. Salvatore, you know, is the CEO of Doro. It was his concept in Rome. He's been working, and it's a tradition carried on at the highest level of Doro, the collection of books. And he thought, I want to do the first digital book. And you open it in a surprise, you know, in a way. Now, of course, the book is actually not that different than an iPhone or an iPad in a certain sense, except it's in book form and binding, and it has a magic to it. And they wrote me last night, they just sold the first edition. So it's a limited edition.
Yeah, and it's
But we're on our
vertical.
way.
Most video is horizontal. This is vertical.
Yes, it's vertical.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both so much for this conversation. It's really just wonderful. I would call you my heroines, my Wonder Women. I've learned so much from both of you throughout my time in the arts, 30 years or so, and it's been a real joy talking with you both.
Thank you.
I want to thank you both, and I want to certainly thank the Knight Foundation, who makes all this possible. And if you are in Miami, go to the Bass Museum and you will see technology transformation Wonder Woman right there in person. Thank you, everybody.
Tom?
Yes.
I just want to say something. One, thank you so much for asking both Barbara and I, the museum, the Bass. Thank you for moderating. I learned something through you. Each of us, I believe, has our own love and our own talents. And we try to exert them as best as we can in life, if we give it homage. And I read your poetry the other day, and I knew your love was there. And I just say for each of us, there's a lot of love and heart to give. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dara. That's very moving to me. I'm very grateful. And there is a lot of love here. it's for friendship to grow. So thank you all. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Dara. Thank you. Tom.
Thank
Talk
you.
soon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.